I would suspect Russia is far more likely to game the entire process, constantly claiming, no, we're doing our bit, but actually nodding a wink to the frontline commander saying, look, guys, carry on. And especially with the aim of pushing the Ukrainians out of the remaining bits of Russian territory that they still hold.
Now, on the front page of the Times today, our defence editor, Larissa Brown, has uncovered how the UK has dramatically increased its ability to produce explosives. For example, by the summer, BAE, that's the UK defence company, will have raised its production of NATO standard 155mm artillery rounds 16-fold over 2 years. Crucially, these new weapons won't have any American components. Francis Tusa is editor at Defence Analysis and joins us. Francis, good morning.
Good morning.
So tell us, Britain's going to increase its ability to produce explosives. How so? And why is it important that we do so independent of France and America?
Well, to put it in a wider context, pretty much every country in Europe is increasing its production of explosives and artillery ammunition. One reason is because of supporting Ukraine. They are in desperate need of artillery ammunition every day. And wise MODs have looked at their ammo bunkers and noted that their stocks are perilously low. Just to give you an idea, if you have an artillery regiment of about 20 guns firing at a relatively, I'd say for NATO standards, low rate of 150 shells a day, they need about 100 tons of propellant and explosives to do that. 100 tons every day. There isn't an open market, a supermarket where you can just go and buy this stuff. Everyone is in desperate need of explosives and propellants, and it's long overdue for the UK to realise that we've been living on borrowed time.
How much of a gear change is this?
It is the first significant recognition of what certainly in France has been called the war economy. That's been a phrase in France for 2 years. So this announcement, and it's joint between BAE Systems and the Ministry of Defence, it's the first recognition that basically the peace that had endured since 1990 is over. And certainly if what I hear is true about the forthcoming Strategic Defence Review, the language used in that basically says, come on, guys, we are at war now.
Well, tell us what you have heard about what's coming. I think the Strategic Defence Review should be made public by the end of spring. I mean, it's fairly vague. What are you expecting?
What I'm not expecting is something that goes through and in effect says we need, 26 ships and 114 fighters. That level of detail, I doubt, will be in the review. It will be a much more strategic, well, as in the name, Strategic Defence Review, basically saying Britain is here. We know we don't want to be here now or even 5 years' time. There are 3 paths Britain can and should take, and these are the implications. And now that doesn't mean it's going to be dodging any of the issues. No, it apparently is very well written and is very direct. And actually, this is apparently one of the problems. It's slightly too direct in terms of some of its language. As I say, basically saying the UK is at war today.
It's going to be a significant stepping up.
Absolutely. Sadly, for someone who is a Cold War warrior, I'm used to the sort of idea of a permanent confrontation. But I can imagine there are plenty of people much younger than me who are going, sorry, war? What do you mean? Why are we going to have to stop spending in certain areas and spend on defence? Well, growing up, for me, that was absolutely normal. So, yes, we are potentially back, not potentially, I think we are back in the 1980s.
The Defence Secretary has said the defence industry is sort of the foundation of our ability to fight and win on the battlefield. Strengthening homegrown artillery production is an important step in learning the lessons from Ukraine. What are those lessons that you think he needs being learnt?
Well, actually, that you can start with the fact that defence is not an optional sort of nice to have. It is a must have. Second, if you do spend your time believing you can just buy whatever you want around the world, suddenly when the hammer falls and you realise that countries saying, no, I can't sell you that because I need it for myself. If you do not have an industrial base yourself, you are actually right royally stuffed.
How much easier will this make it for Ukraine to get the weapons or the artillery that they need if we've independently produced it ourselves?
It will make it much easier. A lot of the 155mm artillery shells, this is the absolute core ammunition type used on the modern battlefield. Previously, when we have provided artillery shells for the AS-90 artillery pieces, which we've donated to Ukraine, we've actually had to buy them from German companies because the UK has not had the industrial capacity to produce them in the numbers required. So suddenly going to the position we are now, and by the way, I have to say, even with a 16-fold increase in production, that's only about 150,000 shells a year, maybe a little bit more. Again, back to the 20 gun artillery regiment, they could fire that in about 5-6 weeks. So it's still not that much. But across the piece in Europe, and Denmark has re-entered artillery production, Norway, Sweden, Finland, all going absolutely all out, and especially Rheinmetall in Germany. Between all of these countries, all the ammunition plants and so forth, with the production rates being talked about, we can almost certainly provide Ukraine with the ammunition they need without having to rely on the United States.
This is a real change, isn't it? When we're saying sentences like without having to rely on the United States. I mean, a few months ago, I don't think it would have been a question to say that they would have been an unreliable ally here.
Yeah, this again is arguably the biggest call it game changer. Certainty is digital. It's 1 or 0. And if you talked about if something happens in Europe, will the United States stand up to NATO treaty obligations? A year ago, 6 months ago, people have said, what are you talking about? Of course they will, because the certainty was they would. The problem is now there is no certainty. You just cannot plan on the United States arriving. And I've dealt with recently people in the Baltic states and Baltic region whose entire defense plans were, can we hold for 45 days until US reinforcements turn up? And they're now going, we've got to plan for the fact the US won't turn up. And so it's a massive change.
We had this so-called truce over the Easter weekend. Ukraine accused Russia of violating it more than 2,000 times, with more attacks continuing across the front line over the weekend and I believe this morning as well. To what extent do you read what happened over the weekend, Francis, as President Putin using it as an opportunity to say, look, I am showing willing? Might that mean that actually a 30-day ceasefire, as Ukraine have been calling for, is on the horizon?
I will believe it when I see it. I would suspect Russia is far more likely to game the entire process, constantly claiming, no, we're doing our bit, but actually nodding a wink to the frontline commander saying, look, guys, carry on. And especially with the aim of pushing the Ukrainians out of the remaining bits of Russian territory that they still hold. I don't see good faith coming out of Moscow.
Francis, thank you very much. Francis Tusa, the editor at Defence Analysis. And you can read more on the front page of The Times today.